Uh-huh. If you want to go get Dr. Brawley, that way. Okay.
Miss or Mrs., which do you prefer?
Ardila Morgan is Ardila, like R. You can take it. Well, I guess we're ready. Everybody got quiet. Good morning and welcome. My name is Kim Ardila Morgan. I'm director of the Center for Applied Ethics, and it's my pleasure to welcome each of you here today. As we start, it's appropriate and fitting to give recognition to those people who have made today possible, as well as the work of the center. I'd like to recognize at this time our presenting sponsor, and if you'd stand and be recognized, Dr. Brett Schellender, who is the past president of the board, and as well as Miss Tenna Wiles, who is the executive director. Is Tenna here? Not yet. Okay. All right. I'd also like to recognize the members of our Ethics Partnership Council, who are an integral part of our mission to build and sustain a culture of ethics in Palm Beach County. Our co-chair, Linda Culbertson, is here, and co-chair Megan Rogers, I don't believe has made it. The other members who are here today are Dorothy Jacks, who is the deputy property appraiser, and who else? Richard Radcliffe is in the back, and Trudy Crowitz from the United Way, she's sitting back there. And also a special recognition for the people that brung us here, the group that spearheaded the establishment and focus of the Center for Applied Ethics was Leadership Palm Beach County. President-elect Kim Jones is here. If you'd stand, please. Thank you. And I forgot, Christy Kelly is with the Commission on Ethics also. Two of our wonderful facilitators who have been delivering our skills training and program are Dr. Roland Williams and Miss Debbie Stewart. We have about 5 others. And last but not least, the wind beneath our wings and the person that dots all the I's and crosses the T's, Miss Yvette Velez, who is in the back there, program assistant for the center. Our sponsor, the Palm Beach County Medical Society, has a mission dedicated to assisting physicians serve the community, the common interest of physicians, maintaining the highest professional and ethical standards, and advocating for physicians and patients while they collaborate for community health, and they do a great job, and we appreciate their support today. As I said, our mission is to build and sustain a culture of ethics. Our approach is what we call the AAA approach: awareness, approaches, and action. Ethics is something that you don't get. There's a popular phrase, got ethics, but kind of like brushing your teeth, going to church, those kinds of things, it's best to pay attention to that on a regular basis. And so as a part of our work, we present these regular forums to help people understand, recognize, and think about the emerging ethical dilemmas in our society. And we appreciate you coming here to support us. Now, as all of us have to navigate the new normal, created by a hyper-connected, hyper-transparent society that's driven by technology, advances in science, many times what we can do outpaces what we should do. And so this is where the lines become blurred and ethical reasoning and values become important. This is where applied ethics becomes our moral compass for living and working in the world today. It's where values and understanding how to resolve dilemmas and taking action become a measure of our worth and subsequently our integrity. Actions integrated with our values are what make up integrity. So our society often decries the ethical lapses that we observe, but just as often we tend to shun and retaliate and punish the truth teller, or often called the whistleblower. And this can often discourage the moral courage that we need to bring about change in our society and our world. So it's all too often just easiest to go along. And this is what we are trying to promote in the seminars that we are presenting here, as well as the Ethics Connection program, to help people understand when they're facing a dilemma and how to take action effectively. In his book, in his life, and in his work, Dr. Brawley moves in that space of moral courage, shining a light on the role of providers, physicians, and patients that we all play in the ethical space of the healthcare system. That is also rapidly approaching the status of becoming an economic disruptor as well as a health disruptor. He told me just to say he was a nice guy. But if you registered for today, you did see his background, and it's been said of him that he is, by trade, an oncologist with a dazzling background of clinical research and policy in a variety of areas of breast cancer, prostate cancer. He's been a correspondent for CNN, and he is now the Chief Medical and Scientific Officer for the American Cancer Society, doing work all over the world. He's working now with Tanzania. In the course of our arrangements for this, he's been in Tanzania and Australia and all over the United States. And I think it is going to be a very enlightening experience for us all today, whether you are a physician, a provider, or a patient. And I want to let you know that he'll be talking about some of the stories in his book. We have the book available at the back if you'd like to purchase it. He'll be available for book signing, and it will expand on what he says today. It takes a lot of courage when you're in a profession such as medicine or police officers or teachers to break ranks. And in his book, Dr. Brawley says, "I'm not worried about breaking ranks. I look forward to it." some of my colleagues are willing to play the game, realizing that care, even useless and appropriate care, makes cash registers emit pleasing sounds. We doctors are paid for services we provide, a variant of piecework that guarantees that we will err on the side of selling more, sometimes believing that we are helping, sometimes knowing that we are not, and sometimes not giving and I paraphrase, darn. So you are in for an interesting and enlightening presentation today. I thank Dr. Brawley for taking time from his very busy schedule to join us, and please welcome me.
Thank you. It's wonderful to hear. Can you hear me? Yes. Great.
Dr. Brawley, I just want to say one other thing before you start. We are getting social today, and you see at the bottom of your agenda, we have, if you'd like to tweet something or go onto Facebook, we have hashtag Brawley, PBSC Ethics, and so we hope you'll share this with your social media.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank Ms. Ardila Morgan. I also want to thank Yvette Velez, who also was very instrumental in organizing my coming here today. A little bit about me and some of the disclosures we always have to do nowadays and really should do. I work both for the American Cancer Society as well as for Emory University. I do some work with Turner Broadcasting, CNN. I am a medical consultant for them. They keep me around because the contrast between me and Sanjay makes Sanjay look even better. And I do some consulting for the government, and I don't accept money from any drug or device manufacturers, and after the next 35 minutes, you're gonna wonder why would they want to give me any. I did publish this book about 2 years ago, and we're going to talk a little bit about the book. Interestingly, when I wrote the book, I wasn't really thinking about the word ethics, but it turns out it really is a lot about ethics. I also think one of the themes that you're going to see is we all have a responsibility to learn, because a lot of the unethical stuff I'm going to talk about here is because people just don't understand some of the things that are going on. Ethics in healthcare really do go side and side, and I was really impressed with what you said. As science evolves, as we develop more technologies, we are developing an issue that needs to be dealt with. Sometimes we can do a lot more than what we should be doing, and that is a huge issue in medicine. Now, I grew up in the inner city of Detroit in a neighborhood that built cars. Everybody who lived in my neighborhood, when they were employed, worked for the auto industry. I was fortunate enough to be sent to the Catholic schools in Detroit and ultimately to the Jesuit high school, where Father Polakowski used to always say, always identify what you know, what you don't know, what you believe, and label them accordingly. When I went off to medical school a few years later, Father Polakowski called me up and said, always remember, doctors have this tendency to confuse what they believe with what they know. And over the last 30 years of being a physician, I've actually learned that to be incredibly true. We also have a tendency to forget that we need to approach things ethically, rationally, and logically. Since this was the week of Martin Luther King's holiday, I pulled this slide out because I'm going to talk a lot about our healthcare system and how unbalanced it is. Actually, I'll just popped into my head, I'll mention this. About 4 years ago, as a reservist, I ended up on a Navy ship as the ship's doctor with 800 Marines. This is back during the surge in Iraq. We were safely off in the Indian Ocean and South Pacific. But we had this sign whenever we left the ship: "We are Americans, we leave no one behind." Then, after 6 months, I came back to Atlanta, to Grady Hospital, the county hospital, where I found out we are Americans and we leave a lot of people behind. A lot of people behind medically. Okay, our healthcare system is a system where some people consume too much healthcare They get unnecessary care. Some people consume too little. They don't get enough. And we actually could decrease the waste in American healthcare if we just started being logical, and we could improve overall health in the United States. And one thing that people don't realize frequently is overconsumption of healthcare can actually be harmful. People die because they get too much healthcare. We need to get into evidence-based medicine. That means appreciate the science. And we need to be orthodox in how we apply the science. Very frequently, you have people who are incredible conservative politically, but when they start talking about medicine, you'd be amazed how liberal they are. They would be embarrassed if they realized how liberal they are in how they are applying medical principles. And we need to be talking about rational use of healthcare, and the politicians need to stop scaring us with this word rationing of healthcare. We see we have overconsumption of healthcare in the United States, and in many respects, I'm going to talk about this, we have the greedy feeding the gluttonous. We have greedy doctors, greedy health hospitals. We have greedy drug companies that are just feeding a whole bunch of people who just want to consume, consume, consume. There's tremendous gluttony in American medicine. We'll talk about that. And in many respects, what's going on in medicine today, you see, is a subtle form of corruption. Now, themes in my talk are we have people who should know better but don't. We have people who do not appreciate the scientific method or scientific findings, and we have people who discourage those who question. The folks who criticize the whistleblower, for example. Themes are we have a huge amount of greed, ignorance, and apathy in the U.S. medicine. Now let me tell you a couple of quick stories here. Santayana said those who don't appreciate history are destined to repeat it. Let's talk about the history of the mastectomy. There is a doctor named Halsted who in 1896 said that the appropriate way to treat a breast cancer is to remove the entire breast, go up to the third level of lymph nodes in the armpit. And by the way, when you remove the entire breast, you count ribs in the operating room. Halsted said this is how you treat breast cancer. Halsted happened to be the chairman of surgery at Johns Hopkins University. All doctors fell in line, and for the next 80 years, that's how we treated breast cancer in the United States. Doctors who in the 1930s said maybe this is too much of an operation actually got fired for questioning Halsted 20 years after he was dead. By the way, the Halsted mastectomy, if it's done appropriately, a woman can never raise her arm higher than this. And if it's done appropriately, the woman will always have lymphedema, a swollen arm. Well, medicine suppressed people who questioned if this was appropriate. And ironically, it probably was the appropriate operation in the 1890s, but by 1930, it was not. Certainly by 1950, it was not. And it was only in the 1970s that we finally were able to mobilize enough people to have the courage to run the scientific study to show that simply removing the tumor and radiating where the tumor was from was equivalent in terms of survival to removing the entire breast, except women didn't get the lymphedema and the restricted arm movement. Women had a lot better quality of life with the better treatment, which in the better treatment's development was suppressed by this tendency to praise people who came up with something in the 1890s and to suppress anyone who questioned it or questioned its effectiveness. Let me give you an example that is a little bit more recent. In the early 1980s, a couple of doctors from Boston, and we tend to have smart doctors in Boston, theorized that giving high doses of chemotherapy to women who had breast cancer or who were at risk, who had breast cancer and had surgery but were at high risk of relapse, giving them very high doses of chemotherapy might rid them of any microscopic disease and keep them from relapsing. The problem, of course, was the high doses of chemotherapy killed off the bone marrow. The bone marrow was an innocent bystander. Well, they came up with a plan. They removed bone marrow from the woman's hip, put it into a freezer, gave her the high-dose chemotherapy, Then once the chemotherapy cleared her body, they gave her bone marrow back. It's called an autologous bone marrow transplant with high-dose chemotherapy. Long phrase. Well, this theory seemed really good, and people started implementing it. People started doing it. The insurances said, hey, there's no science to show that this is beneficial. We don't want to pay for it. Well, Women of America had a solution to that. They sued their insurance companies. They went to their state legislatures. Matter of fact, today, there are 10 states in the United States where there are laws that say insurances have to pay for autologous bone marrow transplant with high-dose chemotherapy. What happened after that? Well, the people who wanted to do the study to see if it was beneficial, they had trouble doing the study in the United States, because why would you go on to this study to see if this works when everybody's getting it? Well, finally in 1999, 18 years into this, 3 studies were finally completed, one in Canada, one in Europe, one finally completed in the United States. They were published back to back to back in the New England Journal, and they all showed the same thing. The amazing thing is we had 3 scientific studies that had the same finding. Bone marrow transplant, increased risk of death versus standard treatment. This thing that women had been suing their insurance companies for actually increased your risk of death. This thing that Congresses in 10 states passed laws on, increased risk of death. The insurance companies were actually right. There was no science to show that it was beneficial. By the way, within 3 months of that publication in 1999, 210 bone marrow transplant centers in the United States closed. 65,000 women had gotten bone marrow transplants in the 1990s alone in the United States. By the way, this is a truly American saga, because they didn't do bone marrow transplant in Europe or Canada because there was no science to show that it was beneficial. Indeed, the science to show that it was harmful was mostly developed in those countries. Mass prostate cancer screening. Now, this is a huge ethical mess for me here. In 1998, I was working for the National Cancer Institute, and I had been an aide to Surgeon General Satcher in my Forrest Gump life. And I went to a cancer center that was funded by the National Cancer Institute. And when the guy from the federal government comes to the cancer center, they know that the federal government's giving them millions of dollars in research money. So they have this dog and pony show about how great their research is. And so I'm sitting there, I'm kind of bored, but I'm sitting next to the marketing guy. And this is where I found out marketing people are evil. Be very careful of marketing people. This guy kept talking to me during the presentations. He was very proud of his business plan for prostate cancer screening. This was 1998. And he explained to me that if they announce at their hospital that they're going to do free prostate cancer screening at a particular mall 6 weeks ahead of time, they're going to get all this free publicity. And he could actually tell me how much it would cost to buy that publicity from NPR and the local newspapers, but they're going to get it for free. And with that free publicity about free prostate cancer screening, this is the bump they're going to get in their chest pain center. This is the bump they're going to get in their breast center from women getting mammograms, because this hospital cares about their man so much they're going to get free prostate screening. And when they get to the mall 6 weeks from now, if they screen 1,000 men age 50 and over who volunteer, they're going to have 155 abnormals. They're going to charge each of those 155 abnormals about $3,000 to figure out why the screen was abnormal. Of the 155 abnormals, they're going to have 55 where they hit bingo, his phrase. They have prostate cancer. And of the 55 guys who have prostate cancer, this is the percentage that are going to get surgery, the percentage that are going to get radiation, the percentage that are going to get observed and get hormones. It gets better. In his business plan, if they screen 1,000 guys and diagnose these 55, this is the number of guys who are going to have impotence to the point that they're going to need a penile implant, this thing to actually cause an erect penis. A little apologetic. Viagra had just come out on the market, and this number might be a little soft now because of Viagra. Okay, then he said that. Then he tells me if we screen 1,000 guys, this is how many guys are going to have urinary incontinence to the point that this is the number of artificial sphincters we're going to sell and our surgeons are going to implant. I'm impressed. I'm a smart guy. I went to the University of Chicago. I asked him one question. If you screen 1,000 guys, how many lives will you save? And he looked at me like I was a total fool, took his glasses off and said, don't you know, there's never been a study to show that this stuff saves lives. This is all about making money. I realized I literally realized I was sitting with the devil. Marketing people are evil. And you know what? The first study ever published to suggest, not demonstrate for sure, suggest that screening saves lives with prostate cancer was published in 2009, 11 years after he explained to me this prostate cancer screening phenomenon in the United States. Now let's talk about prostate cancer screening. These are a series of vans that are run by a company, or they call themselves an organization called Zero, the Project to End Prostate Cancer. It's a 501c3. You can write a check to them and it's tax deductible. They are a charity. They go around, they go to malls, they go to state fairs in the summertime, and they do prostate screening. They'll go to Palm Springs or Palm Beach and they will hook up with a local hospital. Usually they'll hook up with a radio station or a newspaper that will publicize. And you know, when I'm in Atlanta every January, like right now, as I'm driving to work, I can hear that the prostate cancer screening van is at such and such mall today, and it's open from 9 to 5. I actually went there once and saw more guys with cigarettes in their shirt pocket waiting in line to get screened for prostate cancer. This little irrationality there. Okay, go read the 990 for Zero, the Project to End Prostate Cancer. Or even do better, go to their webpage. They are so grateful for Kimberly Clark for buying these vans for them. They thank Kimberly Clark. Why would Kimberly Clark want to buy vans for them? Kimberly Clark is the world's largest maker of adult diapers. Let me tell you, we have scientific evidence that prostate cancer screening sells adult diapers much stronger than prostate cancer screening saves lives, as a matter of fact. Huge problem with ethics here. Those guys from Zero, they think they're doing a public service. They actually think they're doing a public service. Now, the truth about prostate cancer screening is it may save lives. Since 2009, we've got data to show it might. Not that it does, but it might. And so these organizations, including My American Cancer Society and the American Urological Association, those are the guys and gals who make money treating prostate cancer, they actually recommend that people be informed of the potential risks and the potential benefits of prostate cancer screening and make an informed decision. The risks: 1 out of every 200 guys who's treated for prostate cancer with surgery dies from the operation. 30 to 40% of men who get the operation or get radiation end up with urinary incontinence. Larger proportion end up with sexual impotence. Higher risk of suicide among men who are suspected of having prostate cancer and not even diagnosed. But it may save lives. The study published in 2009 said for every 200 guys that you treat for prostate cancer, you prevent 7 from dying, kill 1, and do nothing for the other 192 except tell them earlier than they need to know that they have prostate cancer. That's the science today. So informed decision making from these organizations, looking at the same data and saying don't get screened, are these organizations: the American College of Physicians, being one, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force being another. The American Cancer Society Guideline. Men should have an opportunity to make an informed decision with their healthcare provider about whether to be screened for prostate cancer after receiving information about the uncertainties, risks, and potential benefits associated. The urologist. Given the uncertainty that PSA testing results in more benefit than harm, a thoughtful and broad approach is critical. Patients need to be informed of the risks and benefits of testing. And these vans in these malls, they just say, get it, it's good for you. That's the only informed decision making that's actually done. Huge ethical issue. Lots of money to be made in treating prostate cancer, but people are not being informed. And unfortunately, well-meaning people who should know better are going out pushing prostate cancer screening. I'm not talking about Bob Dole. Bob Dole actually got paid for those commercials. I'm talking about people, I'm talking about little old ladies who think if it's good in cervix cancer and good in breast cancer, it must be good in prostate cancer. Now let's talk about lung cancer screening. A couple of years ago, there was published a study that showed that if you screen people with spiral CT who are at high risk for lung cancer because they're age 55 or greater, they smoked at least a pack of cigarettes a day for 30 years, they're at high risk for lung cancer. If you screen them with this thing called spiral CT and you do it at 30 of the best hospitals in the United States, you save lives. But like most screening things, there's a double-edged sword here. There's a benefit and there's a harm. For every 5.4 lives that you save, you actually kill one person with the diagnostic workup to figure out why they have an abnormal screen. In the actual study, 27,000 people screened over time prevent 87 deaths, kill 16 people doing it. 87 over 16 is 5.4. Okay, harm, benefit. Most organizations, the American Cancer Society included, have said this calls for informed decision making. You take people who are at high risk for lung cancer and you tell them about the harms, you tell them about the benefits, you even tell them that this is when it's done in 30 of the best hospitals in the country, and maybe we aren't one of the 30 best hospitals in the country. And then you let that person decide. Informed decision making is what it's called. St. Joseph's Hospital in Atlanta started offering low-dose spiral CT of the lung to those at risk for $325 cash. Insurance won't pay for it, so bring out the Visa card. And they defined at risk for lung cancer as 40-year-old non-smoking women who have lived in an urban area for more than 10 years. You see, 55 and 60-year-old smokers aren't interested in health. If they were interested in health, they wouldn't be smoking. But 40-year-old women, they're concerned about health. You know, Oprah figured that out when she found Dr. Oz. 40-year-old women are obsessed with health. By the way, 40-year-old non-smoking women are at low risk for lung cancer. Unfortunately, their risk of having a bad outcome due to a biopsy or a screen or so forth doesn't go down nearly as much as their risk for lung cancer. So that 5.4 to 1, their risk benefit is far less than 5.4 to 1. Okay? St. Joe's, by the way, could offer all of this, and they were making money hand over fist. I found this out, by the way, because Emory Healthcare, who I work for, actually bought St. Joe's, and we found the business plan. They had this all written out on how many people they were going to get and how much money they were going to. The ethics of this is just absolutely amazing. We use a lot of screening tests of no proven value, treatments of no proven value, laboratory and radiologic imaging that doctors used to do or can't do because we just can't find the original. We don't do that much anymore because now everything's digital. You just search a hard drive and you don't. It was really easy to lose an X-ray, but now it's digital. You just find the file. You do a search. We used to do these things for legal defense, whether real or imagined. We even did imaging studies and laboratory tests, not because the patient needed it, but because it was tradition. Things that we did in medicine. These are a couple of my favorite quotes. Upton Sinclair. I've been talking to some people who make money off of prostate screening this week, and the Upton Sinclair quote keeps coming back into my mind. But Hal Sachs is the person that we really need to think about. We as doctors claim to be professionals. That means that we need to put the interests of our patients ahead of our own. Now, let's hit the drug companies a little bit. Merck had this drug called rofecoxib. See, on a good day, I can actually say the name. Everybody knew it as Vioxx. Let's talk about the science. It's a COX-2 inhibitor. There's a theory that COX-2 inhibitors won't cause ulcers the way other non-steroidal anti-inflammatories cause ulcers. And so Merck did a prospective randomized trial of Vioxx versus another non-steroidal, which is not a COX-2 inhibitor, called naproxen. And they proved a couple of things in these randomized trials. They actually did 2 of them because they didn't believe the results of the first. In both trials, they were able to show and prove to the FDA that Vioxx decreased pain, arthritic pain. And they proved that it decreased arthritic pain the same as naproxen. They didn't show it was better than naproxen for pain reduction. They showed it was equivalent to naproxen for pain reduction. And they did 2 trials because the first trial didn't show that there was less ulcers with Vioxx versus naproxen. The second trial didn't show that there was less ulcers with Vioxx versus naproxen. So here you have this drug which theoretically should cause less ulcers, but scientifically it doesn't. The FDA approved Vioxx for being equivalent to naproxen. Merck went to their marketing people. Marketing people are evil. And their marketing people utilized the fact that all of us knew about this science about how COX-2 inhibitors should decrease the number of ulcers. They never say in an advertisement that Vioxx decreases ulcers. They can't say that. They cannot say that. And they never do. They utilize the fact that all of us thought that it did to sell Vioxx. They never say Vioxx is equivalent to naproxen, or Motrin for that matter. They say Vioxx is the new drug. And we all know new must be better. Then they marketed it at $90 per month. They actually started making $2.5 billion a year off of marketing naproxen because it was equivalent in ulcers, equivalent in pain control to something that costs 15% of what it costs, naproxen. You could get Vioxx for $90 a month, naproxen for $12 a month. And everything was wonderful at the Merck company for a while. Then, unfortunately, a good friend of mine, Bill Anderson, at the National Cancer Institute, had this theory that COX-2 inhibitors prevent polyps and colon cancer. And he did a randomized trial on a Vioxx versus placebo. The placebo was a cornstarch compressed with a blue dye to look like Vioxx. Over time, he actually showed Vioxx does prevent colon polyps. Never got to the point of does it prevent colon cancer, but it prevents colon polyps. There was a problem. The group that got Vioxx had more heart attacks and strokes than the group that got the placebo. Well, that actually was true in the naproxen versus Vioxx thing too, but a bunch of smart people convinced themselves the naproxen was preventing heart attacks and the Vioxx was not. Well, Bill called me one Sunday morning after they broke the code, and he said, I'm trying to figure out how the cornstarch is preventing heart attacks. Maybe it's the blue dye. Vioxx has now been taken off the market because it causes heart attacks and strokes, and Merck set aside $4.8 billion to settle lawsuits. It was one of the most commonly prescribed drugs in the United States in 2004. My favorite, AstraZeneca gave us this drug called omeprazole. Omeprazole suppresses acid in the stomach for people who have ulcers or people who have reflux, called Prilosec. And it was a great drug for AstraZeneca. They just loved it. They were making $5 billion a year off of Prilosec. Keep in mind, Vioxx was only $2.5 billion. They had one problem with Prilosec. That one problem was the patent ended in 4 years. And so they started this thing called Operation Shark Fin. You can't make these names up, I tell you. Operation Shark Fin was the Manhattan Project to find the next multi-billion-dollar acid suppressor. They needed their next multi-billion-dollar drug because this drug was going to become generic and all these other companies would be making the drug and the price would drop. How would they keep people taking one of their acid suppressors? Well, first they need to develop an acid suppressor. And they tried. Operation Shark Fin was the Manhattan Project to develop the new acid suppressor. They had tremendous difficulty finding a new compound. Then they found a chemist who was smart and knew a little bit about patent law. And he knew chemistry, of course. And you see, omeprazole is two chemicals. They are mirror images of each other, just like your hands are mirror images of each other. And in chemistry, they call these isomers. And then they even call them left-handed and right-handed isomers. And they have a way of naming which is left and which is right. Well, it seems the left-handed isomer of Prilosec suppresses acid. The right-handed isomer is inert. And your kidneys do a lovely thing. He just urinates it away. Well, what this chemist did was he made a pill, this very simple step to separate left and right. I almost wonder why they didn't do it in the beginning. They made a pill of left-handed isomer only. And then AstraZeneca did a clinical trial that my 13-year-old daughter could tell you the end result of. The active ingredient of Prilosec is equivalent to Prilosec. And then they went to the US Patent Office and got a patent on it. Then they went to their marketing guys. Marketing people are evil. What are we going to call our next multi-billion-dollar drug? Let's call it Nexium. Yeah, let's really stick it to them and call the next big one Nexium. Now the marketing guys came up with making it a big purple pill. Got to look different from Prilosec, even though it is Prilosec. They never say it's better. It can't say it's better. It's the same thing. They get FDA approval. They market it. You know, there are people who swear that Nexium is better than Prilosec. It's so funny. But it's the same chemical entity. Now, you can go down the street here and you can buy generic Prilosec for 25 cents a pill. In the same drugstore with Nexium, $6. Nexium is one of the 10 most used drugs in the United States today, and it is on the market at $6 a pill, but you can get the same thing for 25 cents a pill. This irrationality, total irrationality. We really need to start talking about the rational use of medicine, the ethical use of medicine, and not the rationing of medicine. Let's talk about the cost of healthcare, because this is a huge problem. In 2011, in the United States, we spent $2.7 trillion on healthcare. That's what the whole healthcare bill cost. $1 trillion is a big number. 1 trillion seconds ago was Wednesday, 1 million seconds ago was Wednesday of last week, 8 days ago. 1 billion seconds ago was back in 1973, about the time when Dick Nixon resigned. 1 trillion seconds ago was 30,000 years before the Christian era, 30,000 BC. Okay? $1 trillion's a big number. How big is $1 trillion? We spent $1.1 trillion on food minus alcohol in 2011. They spent $1.4 trillion on all personal consumption in China. We spent $2.7 trillion on health care when we spent $1.1 trillion on food. Health care was 18 cents out of every dollar spent in the United States in 2011. It's a huge industry. Another way of looking at it is, these are the biggest economies in the world by gross domestic product. They spent $2.6 trillion on everything in France the year we spent $2.7 trillion on health care. If American healthcare were its own country, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world. Only Germany, Japan, China, and the US are bigger than the American healthcare economy. That's a lot of money, and it's growing. It's estimated by 2025, a quarter out of every dollar spent in the United States is going to be spent on healthcare. As economists look at projections, by the way, in the U.S. budget, it's only Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security that are going to be rising over the next 40 years. So this is a huge issue. And healthcare has been growing by about 2% per year for a long while now. This is actually my favorite graph from one of my favorite medical resources, the Central Intelligence Agency. And this shows life expectancy in red, and the little blue dots are cost per person for health care, and this is in 2005. The United States is up there on the far right. We pay more per person on health care than any other country. You can tell, you don't have to count, we are 29th in life expectancy, yet we pay more per person on health care than any other country. Switzerland is the 4th stripe over there. Switzerland is the 2nd most expensive country on health care per person. And this is where I talk about we don't get what we pay for. A couple of reasons for that. Let's look at Canada. Everybody likes to bash Canada, the Canadian healthcare system. Let's look at Switzerland, and let's look at the United States. For infant mortality, we don't do as well. By the way, Cuba has a better infant mortality rate than the United States. White male life expectancy, we don't do as well as Canada or Switzerland. Per capita healthcare costs in 2010, we spent $8,233 for every man, woman, and child in the United States on healthcare in 2010. They spent $5,300 in Switzerland and $4,500 in Canada. In terms of proportion of gross domestic product, Switzerland and Canada are at 11.4%, we're at 18%. Most European countries are at 8 and 9%. And by the way, the little dirty secret, you're better off living in Germany, Switzerland, even England than the United States, because your risk of dying from cancer are lower, your risk of dying from heart disease are lower, your risk of living longer is better. Our healthcare system sucks. And we pay more than anybody else. By the way, the European Union refused to give a patent to AstraZeneca for Nexium. They said, you got that patent when we gave it to you for Prilosec 18 years ago. That Nexium Prilosec story, that's a uniquely American story. You ain't going to find that problem in Europe or Canada. There's a little bit of rationality in other healthcare systems while we think ours is better than everybody else's. Now, let's talk about smoking. We need to start stressing prevention. One of the differences between European healthcare systems and our system, ironically, is that we don't stress prevention. We stress finding disease in people so we can treat it and make money off of it. In Europe, they stress preventing the disease. It's interesting because, when I first started going to Europe 30 years ago, I thought they smoke more than we do. And it's actually not true. It's just more obvious that they smoke when they smoke. These are smoking rates in the United States: blue for men, red for women. In 1955, 55% of adult males smoked cigarettes. It's down to about 21% today. 1965, 35% of adult females smoked cigarettes. It's down to about 16% today. We can do better. We can do a lot better. By the way, that's nationally. In West Virginia, Missouri, and Kentucky, it's about 30% of adults smoke. In California, it's about 10% of adults smoke. Tobacco, that is. Obesity. Now, this is where the fat guy talks about obesity. In 1970, 15% of American adults were obese. This is not the condition known as overweight. Okay? Ethically, I can't talk about being overweight. I'm going to talk about obesity. 15% of Americans were obese. 2008 and today, it's about 35%. Worst among kids, 4% in 1970, 20% in 2008. Dramatic rise in obesity in the United States. Among certain groups, non-Hispanic blacks as well as Hispanics, obesity rates are even higher. So look at the women. Half of all black women in the United States are now obese. This is obesity for the entire population of a number of countries from 1970 to 2010. You can see England here. I don't know if I can do that. Let me see. England has a growth of obesity, but the United States, look at it, versus England, Canada, Spain, France, Switzerland, Italy, Ireland, Korea. Huge problems with obesity. This is the ethics of fast food in many respects. Some of the folks with gray hair in the room actually remember that there were about a half a dozen McDonald's in 1965 in the United States. We also remember 1981, that was the year they put the drive-thru in to make it even easier to get high calories. Not to pick on McDonald's, by the way. In the United States, this obesity epidemic is causing a tsunami of chronic disease: diabetes, cardiovascular disease, orthopedic disease. The number of hip and knee replacements is just amazing. And many people don't realize the combination of high caloric intake, lack of physical activity, and obesity has been linked to 12 different cancers: colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, a number of others. We need to stress prevention. If we really want it to be scientific, we need to stress prevention. Indeed, that combination of high caloric intake, lack of physical activity, and obesity is likely to surpass tobacco as the leading cause of cancer in the United States in the not too distant future. We need to start doing many of the things that we know work, but we're just not doing. We need to focus on prevention. We have just been too treatment-centered. We've been too centered on finding disease and treating it, and not centered enough on preventing it. We need to change the way we pay our doctors. The incentive in the United States really is find the disease and treat it. Doctors have very little incentive to prevent disease. It's interesting because you would actually think with all the exercise commercials you see and all the diet commercials you see and all these vitamins that are consumed, by the way, with no science to support it, you would think that we're all obsessed with health. You would think we are, but we really aren't. And so I'm going to finish by saying healthcare is something that needs to be approached ethically, logically, rationally. We need to realize what we know, what we don't know, and what we believe. Some of us who've been advocates for things like prostate cancer screening need to realize what we don't know and what we believe. And keep in mind the United States is a place where some people consume too much health care and they're harmed by it. Some people consume too little and they're harmed by it. And we could do so much better. We could decrease the waste and we could improve overall health. We need to focus on evidence-based medicine. That is, we need to respect the science. We need to talk about what is rational and stop talking about rationing. Talk about what is rational. We need to realize that our technologies... Did I do that? We need to realize that our technologies are sometimes outpacing our wisdom. And there is a healthcare fiscal cliff, by the way. The economy will crash when we get to about 25 to 30% of our economy being healthcare. It will be, make the 1928 crash look like a picnic. We're actually in a lot of trouble because of healthcare. So it's actually incredibly important that we take the bull by the horns and actually start trying to be a little bit more rational in our practices and focus on the things that matter and walk away from the things that just help make a lot of money for a few people. And it really is possible that we can decrease costs and improve overall health in the United States if we stick to good scientific principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brawley. We're going to have an opportunity now for question and answers. We had a few questions on these cards that we distributed, but I think he answered a lot of those. I'll just start off with one, and then I'd like to give the first question after that to someone from our students. We have a class here, I believe. So this question was, it seems to me that some of my doctors order redundant tests, especially if the doctor is in a group that has an interest in the testing facility. What is your opinion on this?
I can't speak about that particular practice or that particular test, but I can tell you, unfortunately, that does happen in the United States. What actually happens more commonly is people go to several different doctor groups for several different problems, and the same test gets ordered by doctors who don't know the result of the other test. And that's one of the reasons why there's been this move toward an electronic medical record where people can actually share information a little better. That unfortunately also creates some issues having to do with privacy.
Okay, thank you. Is there a question from the students? No?
Okay.
Okay, if you come up to the mic.
Yeah, there's a mic for you.
What's your view on medical marijuana?
Medical marijuana. I've gotten this question 3 times in the last week. There are clearly some medicinal compounds within marijuana, or translated, there are some chemicals in marijuana that have medicinal uses. The question is, what are those chemicals? What are their uses? And what are the doses? Now, THC, the part of marijuana that makes people high, or the highest, is already marketed in a pill called Marinol. Most people don't realize that. It's a Schedule II drug that oncologists can prescribe for nausea. It's a drug that some neurologists prescribe for multiple sclerosis, and it is derived from marijuana. But there are other chemicals in marijuana that I'm certain have some medicinal uses. We need to do the science to figure that out. Now, marijuana is currently classified by the Drug Enforcement Administration as a Schedule I drug. I can write a script for Schedule 2 through 5, but it takes a special license to write a script for Schedule 1. Cocaine, by the way, is Schedule 2, as is morphine. If we move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, we could actually start doing some of the research to figure out what chemicals have some activity and what the dose should be. Right now, with people going to Colorado to buy weed, we have a lot of really total disorganized experimentation. And when we have total disorganized experimentation, we end up having people harmed, and that's a tremendous concern. The other issue is marijuana is a combustible, and combustibles clearly cause chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, and bronchitis. Marijuana smoking does cause lung cancer, so there's some harms associated with it. Actually, if I were to see the future in a crystal ball, the future is going to be vaping certain chemicals out of marijuana to get the medicinal properties for treatment of pain, for treatment of multiple sclerosis, treatment of seizure disorders, and treatment of nausea induced by drugs, by other drugs. Did I give you the answer?
All right, thank you. And I just want to recognize the 30 or so people we have watching at home in their bunny slippers and robes or at their desks with coffee. We are linking this, and by the way, about a week or so after this, if you go to our resource page of the Center for Applied Ethics, palmbeachstate.edu, you will be able to see this presentation again if you have not, or refer a friend or colleagues to it. Okay, our next question is, what do you think it will take to transform our healthcare system to improve quality, improved experience, and lowered costs?
That's the big question. I actually think, part of me thinks that our healthcare system is going to have to cause our economy to collapse before we actually try to fix it. Because there's a whole bunch of people who are so rooted in making money off of our current healthcare system, they don't want anything to change. Part of me wants to believe that folks like me talking about let's be rational, let's respect the science, let's realize that sometimes there are things we should not be doing, and sometimes there are things we should be doing that we're not doing. Hopefully that will come. I think we're running out of time for that, quite honestly. You know, with estimates that 25% of our economy will be healthcare within the next 15 years, I think we're starting to run out of time. It may very well take the entire economy collapsing under the weight of healthcare.
Well, to follow on that, the next question is, what can we as an individual, or what can the individual do?
I would advise people to protect themselves, number one, from healthcare. I see a lot of people who are hurt by healthcare. Keep in mind, one thing I didn't mention in that lung cancer screening thing, in the study that showed lung cancer screening saved lives, a third of the people who actually died as a result of lung cancer screening didn't have cancer. Yeah, they were healthy. Only take drugs if you absolutely need to have them. Only take tests if they are shown to be beneficial. Talk to your doctor, question your doctor. Doctors actually generally like it when patients try to have conversations with them. That's the thing that nobody actually realizes. Doctors actually would like to talk to people while they're doing their work as opposed to just writing out orders. Try to get involved and try to understand your diseases or your need for health care, and I think you can actually get a better healthcare product as a result.
Okay, thank you. Is there another question? Okay, you had a question?
Yeah, at the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about how
Stand up.
they how you got offered like money for like from drug companies to I don't know like to
No, I said that I don't know of a drug company or a device company that would want to offer me money.
yeah, and then you like rejected them or something.
No.
Oh.
They don't want to pay me because they don't like what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, what were those companies? Or you want to tell us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right there, behind you.
Okay.
Morning, doctor. Thank you for being here. My name is David Hernandez. I come from the Boca Raton from the Honors College. Currently doing a project on regenerative medicine. And one of my questions is the fast pace in genomic science, which you spoke about on TEDMed. I saw it on last night. And the field of regenerative medicine has caused a high increase in ethical debates due to the misuse of the healthcare system. This in turn has caused people to turn against the science of regenerative medicine in ways for us to be able to even find a cure for cancer. What would be the solution for this? You think it would be education or awareness?
Yeah, I think that people really do need to understand what science is and the value of science. I actually think in regenerative medicine, there's a lot of possibilities there. Actually, in things like regenerative medicine for making new organs for people who have heart, or new valves, for example, for people who need a valve replacement, that sort of thing. I think that's very soon. And you mentioned genomics. Genomics has hit my area very hard. You know, we are redefining cancer. Many people don't realize that cancer was defined by some German pathologists in the 1850s who did autopsies on people. And they were the first people to do biopsies and H&E staining and look at these things under the microscope. And they drew pictures and said, this is what lung cancer looks like. This is what breast cancer looks like. Well, now, and talk about our problem with technology, there is, in a hospital near here today, undoubtedly, a woman who is getting a mammogram and then will get an MRI and an ultrasound and, you know, all of those things. What? X-ray, 1895, mammography, 1955, ultrasound, the 1960s, CT scanning, the 1970s, MRI, the 1980s, stereotactic biopsy, 2000. Okay? She's going to get all those things. They're going to biopsy a 5-millimeter lesion seen in her breast and send it to a pathologist. The pathologist is going to do the same H&E staining that Virchow and the pathologist did in 1853. Look at it under a 2015 version of the microscope. You know, we got electric light on it now instead of a candle. And the pathologist is going to say, this looks just like what Virchow said killed that woman he autopsied in 1853. Now, the problem is that 5-millimeter thing, which they're going to call a breast cancer, may not be genomically programmed to grow, to spread, and to kill. It might be, but it might not be. With genomics, within the next 10 years, I'm going to be able to say, Mrs. Jones, you do have a cancer, but it's the kind that 30% of American women have. It's a localized cancer that's never going to kill you. I could cure you, but you don't need to be cured. So let's watch this. Or I can say, Mrs. Smith, you got one hell of a problem, and we're glad we found it at 5 millimeters, because we're going to be able to cure you with intensive treatment, because you need to be cured. That's what genomics is going to do for us in very short order. In breast cancer and in prostate cancer, we're actually already able to guess, but we're not willing to actually act on that guess yet. We're going to have enough data to actually act on that prediction. When you act on we've got enough data, it becomes a prediction versus a guess. We're going to be able to act on that within the next 10 years. So genomics is really important. We need the people to understand the importance of good science and supporting good science.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes. Question over there.
Doctor, I'm Cheryl Platt, the program director for massage therapy. So our students who come, we represent complementary alternative medicine, teach, transform. If you could, I mean, I'm a therapist for 30 years, and we've come a long way to be accepted more in conventional medicine. I'd like to hear you comment on it, alternative, complementary, as prevention and treatment.
Yeah, there's a very appropriate and proper place for I actually don't like the phrase alternative medicine. Complementary is much better. When the patient feels better, that's an improvement. Where I get into some difficulty is some folks who want to cure a cancer with chiropractic or massage. Massage and chiropractic are great for making people feel better, for addressing some orthopedic issues. Actually, I'll tell you, acupuncture has tremendous uses in the treatment of nausea caused by chemotherapy. Acupuncture has tremendous uses in the treatment of a number of orthopedic illnesses as well as some other things. So I keep an open mind. My problem, and the reason why I don't like the phrase alternative medicine, is alternative implies that it's medicine or a process that is not going to be assessed through the scientific method. Go ahead.
From examples, okay, so one of my specialties is in lymph drainage. All right, so you have
Lymphedema?
right.
Yeah.
Well, but you can also prevent the lymphedema from occurring by receiving immediately post-surgery. So, I mean, I've seen it, I've done it, I've helped.
Oh,
in
I'm
this
not
process.
debating you. I'm actually agreeing with you. I'm sorry.
Okay. I find, 30 years, I'm totally frustrated because the thinking
You're
is,
frustrated because there are some people who have had the closed-mindedness that has created this incredible mess that I just talked about. See, you're actually a victim of some of what she was talking about earlier, where people actually try to keep people from thinking openly. They suppress people who question.
but they won't think openly because there's no triple-blind studies done. We do have research, Touch Research Institute here in Miami, and there's one in Europe. But because, so example, one of my clients, the wife of a internist physician, received massage regularly. He, on the other hand, would choose to get into an argument with me that because without triple-blind study, he sees no reason for it, he will never have it. He is, fast forward, in a major vehicle accident, which made him stop practicing medicine, and still wouldn't get it because of where he's stuck in his head on no triple-blind studies, which does not make any sense whatsoever, because especially what you just said, being bone and muscle, is number one what we help to. But there's so many other pieces because there's so many other body work modalities that come under our scope of practice.
Yeah.
And medicine, I mean, we were teaching first-year med students, and just to get them exposed to some of this where they're not.
Yeah.
It
There are
can
some
help.
people you're never going to
Education.
be able to change their minds.
Well, where it's beating our head against the wall in traditional medicine, pharmaceuticals, and the FDA.
Okay, is there another question over here? Thank you. Oh, okay. Karen?
Doctor, thanks very much for coming. This has been fabulous. My question relates to commercial agricultural business and the heavy use of herbicides, pesticides, and chemicals. Does the American Cancer Society or any of the other organizations that you're affiliated with recognize that the chemicals that are in our food, our primary food stream, may be leading to an increase in the diseases that you raised and the obesity issue?
Well, first off, the obesity issue is because people consume too much of those foods, and there's a lot of research to actually show that calorie-dense processed foods are a problem, as opposed to how the foods are grown and whether they have been treated with pesticides and other things. There are certainly certain pesticides that are harmful, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer actually maintains a list of those pesticides. Most of them are not used. And then you have to, when you're looking at food being generated on farms, you have to look at two things. We've actually had infectious disease outbreaks in this country within the last 2 years because pesticides weren't used. And we had people who've died due to those infectious diseases from plants, especially sprouts and other things in California. And so one has to actually sort of do a balancing act. There's certainly certain chemicals we don't want on our food. There's certain chemicals that actually would be quite useful on food. And some of the organic practices or some of the faith in organics in the United States actually are misplaced, but some are well placed. So you have to walk a tightrope there.
I wish I had Dr. Brawley for science when I was in school, don't you? Such a great... let's go over to this side. We've kind of been ignoring them a little bit.
Hello, Dr. Brawley. I had a question about your... stand up. Okay, sorry. I had a question about... You talked about prevention earlier. You talked about mastectomies and breast cancer. And my question was, we just had Angelina Jolie take steps. What's your opinion on that and with her family history and whatnot?
Yeah. That even brings up an even bigger problem of you have a whole bunch of folks who want to do what the star did. We have a large number of women who are getting prophylactic mastectomies to lower their risk of getting breast cancer. Now, I just said something that most women who get prophylactic mastectomies don't zero in on. They get prophylactic mastectomies to keep from getting breast cancer. I said lower risk of getting breast cancer. Indeed, I have 6 patients who had prophylactic mastectomies more than 10 years before they were diagnosed with breast cancer. Okay? It lowers risk, not to zero. There are a host of women who are getting prophylactic mastectomies who shouldn't, because their risk of getting breast cancer to begin with is already small, so the prophylactic mastectomy doesn't reduce their risk as much as they think it does. With Miss Jolie, I can speak about it because she talked about it openly. She had a specific mutation of the BRCA gene that increases her risk of getting breast cancer by 85%. All right. There are, or another way, I should word it differently. 85% of people like her, if they live long enough, will get breast cancer. There are BRCA mutations that increase risk by a very small amount. And those women perhaps ought not get these surgeries. And then, of course, I've had the unfortunate experience. BRCA is a 120,000 letter word, BRCA1. And a mutation is a misspelling of that 120,000 letter word that causes the enzyme coded by the gene to not work. This analogy actually works. As a matter of fact, her mutation, the first 38,000 letters show up and the rest is not there. Okay? Other women have just one letter off out of the 120,000. Okay? We have women who go get these tests and perhaps even shouldn't get these tests because they have no family history, and they're told you have a misspelling. You have a misspelling and we don't know if it is harmful to you or not. It probably isn't. These women immediately say, I have a mutation, and they run out and they get bilateral mastectomies. I actually know of several women who got bilateral mastectomies 7 or 8 years ago because they had an aberration of their gene that today we know is an aberration of no significance. Now, this is some of the irrationality of people running. They were not at higher risk than normal, but they had an abnormality because they got a test they shouldn't have gotten. But women should talk to genetic counselors. There's, by the way, a gene company that actually gives doctors, usually surgeons and gynecologists, all expense paid ski vacations to go learn about their technology. And those doctors frequently come back to their office and then start prescribing these genetic tests. The woman really ought to see a genetic counselor, and the genetic counselor and she need to have a conversation and a decision be made as to whether they should get these genetic tests.
Okay, thank you. Yes, one more question over here. We've been over there.
Yes, I would like to know whether, in your opinion, we're getting anywhere closer to dealing with pancreatic cancer, because I'm well aware that it's one of the most aggressive, and we don't really have, up till now, any type of breakthroughs, major breakthroughs. Do you see anything happening on the horizon?
Yeah, pancreatic cancer is a real problem. It's about the fourth or fifth leading cause of cancer death in the United States. There really is no early detection because the pancreas is sitting right in the middle of the abdomen without a shell around it. The liver, for example, has a capsule around it, and if liver cancer starts growing through that capsule, you can have pain. With pancreatic cancer, it literally is just sitting in the middle of the abdomen, and when you have very few cells already, it has started spreading throughout the abdomen, so there's really no early detection. The only hope that I have is there's a huge project at the National Cancer Institute that's looking at the RAS gene, R-A-S, capital R, capital A, capital S. If we ever develop the technology, the scientific technology, to control the RAS gene, we're going to have drugs and targets within pancreatic cancer, neuroblastoma, some of the lung cancers, and all of a sudden all of those diseases are going to be a lot more treatable. And so that's my support for the RAS project at the NCI. But there is no good screening for pancreatic cancer at this juncture because when we diagnose it, it's already at stage 3 or stage 4 and uncurable.
Okay, thank you. We have one last question.
I'll try to stick around for some of the other folks.
Yes.
What's your feeling on the forced Obama health care?
Oh,
Is it a moneymaker?
yeah, we can call it Obamacare now because he cares and they don't. I spend a lot of time talking about and studying about the large number of Americans in the United States who die, or even more, who suffer because of inability to access health care. At the same time that we have this country where there's a bunch of people who actually are harmed because they over-access health care. There are a number of aspects of the Affordable Care Act that are incredibly important. In my job at the American Cancer Society, used to always have to deal with, every 2 or 3 weeks, a young adult about your age who had a childhood leukemia and got cured when they were 5 or 6 years old. But because of our old health care plan, everybody's health care had usually $1 million or a $2 million cap. And so I would get the 26, 27-year-old young nurse who was labeled uninsurable because she had consumed $1 million in health care when she got her leukemia cured at the age of 6 or 7. See a lot of those folks all the time. As a matter of fact, my goal was always to try to get them a job working for the U.S. government because health care from government employment didn't have that cap. That was the only way they could get health insurance. And I've even seen that person get into an auto accident and break a leg and end up filing for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy because they were employed but uninsurable. I've seen people who were sick and they're 19, 20 years of age and were going to get thrown off their parents' insurance plan when they turned 21. but who's going to keep paying for their treatment for their rheumatoid arthritis or so forth? The insurances now have to cover them until 27 on the parent's health plan. And the first chapter in my book, and I'm not hawking my book, is about a woman who had difficulty with her insurance and let her breast cancer fester until her breast fell off because of uninsurability or uninsurance. So any plan to get people insured and get people access to care, I think, is good. Now, is the plan perfect? No, it's not perfect. Half of the country worked long and hard to keep the bill from ever being put into place. Bills that are better are bills where both sides negotiate and work out a compromise. And here we had a bill that came forth because the other side said, the hell with people who don't have health care. We're not going to compromise. And by the way, I wouldn't criticize the other side if the other side had come up with some alternative plan. That's what we call compromise. And yeah, I ran around on a Navy ship with the motto, we're Americans, we leave no one behind. Yet, David Satcher estimates that 60,000 to 80,000 Americans die every year because of lack of insurance.
Why do we have Obamacare and all these other insurances like this?
Say again?
Why don't they just go with like one insurance? Why do they have all
Actually, there were some people there's some Affordable Care Act advocates who wanted a one insurance plan, who wanted one insurance. And there was a huge number of folks who make money who did not want a one insurance plan. Now, I actually think that what we should have is more on the order of what's in Switzerland or what's in Taiwan, where people have the option of usually about 6 or 8 insurance plans. There's a huge number of people who did not want one insurer. The Hillary Clinton's plan in the early 1990s was much more of a one insurer plan.
All right, thank you again. And
Thank
as
you.
the hostess, I have the prerogative of the last question,
Yeah.
and that is with the philosophy that the Center for Applied Ethics strategy is to engage, inform, and inspire people toward living, working, and thinking more ethically. A big part of that is values-based decision-making, and then ultimately having the courage to take that action. And I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, to share with us at what point your values came into tension and you made the decision to step out and break ranks.
That's an interesting question. My co-author of the book, Paul Goldberg, has this theory that I turned 50 and had a midlife crisis. There's a story in the book about a Jesuit priest named Father Fallon, who was fond of saying, sometimes you just see something and you just get so fed up, you just have to start banging your fist against a wooden desk and start screaming. And he used to say, there's this word that starts with an S, hits this H, goes through this I, and then hits a hard T. And it's great for relieving frustration. Paul would say that my book was me just doing that finally. We got so many people who are hurt and could be helped by our healthcare system, hurting and could be helped by our healthcare system. And it's such a shame that our healthcare system is not rising up to its full potential. And at the same time, we got all these people who think that our healthcare system is so great. And so maybe it's a little bit of growing up in Detroit, and and I'm sort of in the bonus right now. Life is pretty good for me compared to where I've been before, so it's easier for me to speak up.
It's a little bit harder in your greener stage of a career, I would imagine, but I want to thank you. It's important for all of us to pick up the standard, the ideas and strategies that Dr. Brawley has given us. It's important to have values and skills and decision making, but the final step really is that moral courage. And so we look to those people who have had the courage to step up and cut a path and make their voice heard. So we salute you and we thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, I will ask you to please complete the evaluations. If you did not get one, we depend on those to know what other kinds of topics. Ethics is a broad area, and we're going to be putting it under the microscope in lots of other professions and areas. Dr. Brawley has kindly agreed to stay back. We have a table there for book signing. Pardon? Oh, we have a table at the back where he'll be available to sign your books or chat with you if you like. And we thank you again for coming and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Hope to see you again at the next forum. Thank you.
I teach anatomy and physiology.